Hello, and welcome to Wired for Change, where we look at the people, technologies.
Fraud is huge and it's impacting our national economic security. It's only 5 to 10% of fraud is reported, right? I think what's reported is well over $500 million a year, but that's like peanuts. It's like in the billions. It's crazy. And it's everything from like when you think of scams, like romance scams, newcomer scams, there's real estate scams, there's like anything can have a scam, any angle. Elderly fraud where people have been defrauded of their whole life savings and then people suffer. Like it's not just a financial loss, it's like mental health. They have struggles. Some people commit suicide. Like this is a real thing that really has a huge impact on families, people, on their lives. So it's a crime and it is public safety and it is national security. How do we work together? What are the legs, the regs, the policies, the information sharing rules, everything, right? Like, how do we make this work?
Hello, and welcome to Wired for Change, where we explore the people, technology, and ideas reshaping our world. I'm your host, Amy Yee. Today, we're coming to you live from the Deloitte Greenhouse at Bayview Yards in Ottawa. And I've got an amazing studio audience here with us today. I've always wanted to be able to say, a live studio audience, right? And what a great looking audience you are. Thank you so much for coming out. I want to do a round of applause for all of you for coming out for this very special podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience and your, of course, desire to see Kelly here live with us today. So let's get started. Oh, I also wanted to mention for our online audience, thank you so much for joining us. And also, please feel free to enter your questions into the chat if you're joining us on one of our platforms, LinkedIn Live or YouTube. And we have someone in the room who will be facilitating those questions at the end of our talk today. And then we'll be going to our in-person segment of today's show. So let's get started. Financial crime has always been about more than just money. So it's about following the money. And when you follow the money, you start to see the systems underneath. You start to see the power, incentives, influence, vulnerabilities, and the decisions that organizations make under pressure. Right now, that landscape is evolving quickly. AI-enabled fraud, organized crime networks operating globally, cybercrime, cryptocurrency, geopolitical instability. The lines between financial crime, technology, public trust, and national security are all becoming increasingly blurred. I'm so happy to have with us today our guest, Kelly Bradshaw, retired Chief Superintendent with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, where she led the Federal Policing Criminal Operations Financial Crime Program. This is Kelly's second time with the Wired for Change podcast. Kelly is back by popular demand for all the extensive experience that she brings to the table and unique experience as well. And if you'd like to check out the first episode with Kelly, it starts off from gas masks to cybercrime. So thank you, Kelly. Let's have a warm round of applause for Kelly today.
Thank you.
This is a conversation about power, pressure, credibility, and the unseen dynamics shaping decision-making in the systems that govern us today. Kelly, you've had quite a career. I wonder if, and also you've mentioned to me before that you had a little bit of regret with respect to not starting in financial crime earlier. And I know you had accountability for financial crime and cybercrime at one point as well. Tell us a little bit about the story, about what you did and what got you there.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And I have to agree, this audience is amazing. I'd like to say thank you for my WIDS executive folks for being here. That's awesome. I love that. And also, there's some amazing women from public safety, security, defense. So it's nice to see everybody in industry. So thank you. Okay, so a little thing called the pandemic happened, right, in 2020. And I was just returning from a UN deployment. I was deployed. I took the first police contingent over to Mali in West Africa to MINUSMA. It was the largest UN mission on the planet at the time. And I was over there from 2019 until 2020. So the pandemic was just kind of getting rolling. And I think it kind of started over here before over there, because when I came home, when I think it was May 2020, I didn't really understand what was happening. Everyone was kind of like, everyone was in their homes. People were kind of avoiding each other. My friends were baking bread. Uh, and then a few months later, I started baking bread and then having wine on Wednesday night. Anyway, there's lots of things to catch up on with COVID, but I found myself back from a large or UN deployment mission out of country for a year, and then getting back into the RCMP. At the time, I was the superintendent, kind of waiting for my next deployment. Like, what would I be doing? And um, I ended up in the cybercrime area. The RCMP wanted a strategy written for updated for cybercrime. So I started working on that. And the individual who was running cybercrime and financial crime at the time, he was promoted to the rank of assistant commissioner, and he went to national security. They were looking for someone to fill in for him. So I stepped in, and it was interesting. So I was running cybercrime and financial crime during COVID, kind of from home with a team that I was just learning, like a lot of new people. So I saw their faces on screen. I would go into the office a lot because with cybercrime and financial crime, we worked with international partners, we worked with federal partners, and a lot of the conversations needed to be protected. So I'd have to go into secure facility, have those secure conversations, meetings. So I was kind of back and forth to the office, kind of working online. It was just a bizarre time. But what I found really interesting was to step into the role of leading the financial crime program at the level that I was, because didn't really have experience in it throughout my career. Certainly, like when I think back to everything I did in policing, when I think about it, it all has to do with financial crime. Most crimes are committed because people want money and they want, they're greedy and they want power and they want more money. And I felt like for a lot of my career, maybe I got caught up in the shiny things like the guns, the drugs, the human, not the shiny, but like the human trafficking, the things that were getting the money for the bad guys. So I think my focus shifted on, oh, let's follow the money, because the money is where like the kingpins are, or the big bosses are, the people that are really profiting from victimization and hurting people and harming, whether it's extorting, stealing, defrauding. I mean, you name it, right? Like nothing's off limits. And so all those shoddy things are interesting, but or the things that are happening, but it's really about money, other than crimes of passion and perhaps, ideological crimes, but they still need money to finance them through terrorist financing or other ways to finance. So I think it all comes down to money. And I was thinking, why at the end of my career am I getting into this? Because it's so darn interesting. And the level that I was at, I liked it because I was able to influence the direction within the program somewhat, because cryptocurrency was really taking off, and we were figuring out like the training courses that were required, and the packages, changing the criminal code, right, on how seizures were done and disclosure, everything. Um, and at the time too, there was all this talk about sanctions because what was happening with Russia and Ukraine was happening, and um, you know, then there was the Freedom Convoy. Like there was all these things happening that were huge, that had big financial impacts. And the freezing of assets, that was such a big conversation. And I don't want to get into that because it's a touchy one. But I mean, just and then learning about money laundering, I was the chair, because my that was the role that I stepped into. I was the chair of a Five Eyes Felag money laundering working group. So I was leading the Australians, UK, Americans, Kiwis. We were all working together, and here I am, kind of thrown into this chair role, having to learn really quickly. And I think what I learned in that role too is you got to trust your experts, and ask questions and really get them thinking about things so they can explain it to you in a way that makes sense and that you can take to like government meetings where you're talking with the regime about, how do we improve Canada's stance against money laundering and fraud? How do we work together? What are the legs, the regs, the policies, the information sharing rules, everything, right? Like, how do we make this work? And then on top of that, what I'm a really big proponent of that I saw in financial crime that I loved was the public private partnerships as well. There's been some really neat sorry that I'm just going right into this
That's okay.
question, but there's been some really neat projects that were created with FinTrack and the RCMP and the financial institutions where they've targeted money laundering threats for like human trafficking, for sexual exploitation, sexual exploitation of children, uh, the fentanyl problem, casino transactions. So there's um, another one on romance scams. So, these key indicators that the banks are seeing and that FinTrack can pull from the banks and then feed back into the law enforcement community so that they can have a better idea of the trends, what's really happening, and where they need to focus their resources and time to really make a difference. But that's what's so key is it's not just one agency. It's so complex that you need people working together. A real Team Canada approach is needed. And I think too, having left the RCMP and I worked for Accenture for 3 years in the public safety space. Um, I'm no longer with Accenture. I'm kind of doing new things, just embarking on. But I think what I learned there too is like industry can help as well with like big data analytics. And really, when I think about the troves of information and intelligence that was coming into the RCMP from FinTrack, and then the need for the ability to really like crunch that and like ingest it, digest it, understand it, and then really be strategic about how I guess you plan the operations and where you're going to focus your limited resources, right, to have the biggest impact. So I think there's just so many aspects to it that we could talk about.
Well, how about you take us into a bit of a deeper dive into a story that stayed with you from a particular investigation or a particular operation that you were working on. Help us to understand what that felt like a little bit more and what struck you.
Yeah, I don't know that it's like a particular investigation, but something that really stuck with me was there was a woman in the RCMP that worked. She's like a police uniformed police officer who is dedicated to financial crime most of her career. Um, and she was struggling a little bit. She was becoming an expert in cryptocurrency. And I think what she was getting kind of stuck up against was getting the support from her superiors who weren't quite convinced that cryptocurrency was going to be a big threat, or was going to stick around long. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's kind of how we felt about the internet back in the 90s. But I noticed that she was struggling with it. Very intelligent, very well informed, really trying to make a difference. Was getting a name for herself too, like doing lots of like she was really well known across Canada, which was awesome. And it was like, how do I support this? Because I think this is big, and a lot of cryptocurrency is not illegal, but a lot of criminals are certainly using it to move their money. Even cryptocurrency ATM machines in Canada, we have the most per capita in the world, like something like over 4,000, I think, or more than that. I have the numbers, but a large amount of these ATM cryptocurrency machines. And I would say the majority of them are used for money laundering and to defraud people of money. And it's just, yeah, it's not good. Um, and so she was working on developing, like, working with Crown prosecutors on the disclosure packages, how to do proper seizures. She was also working, changing the criminal code, right, for how seizures are done, and how to, ensure that the police were able to get successful prosecutions, and working on a training program to ensure that police officers who were in the field that were going to be doing this work would have the ability and the skills and the education the capabilities to do it properly. And even a little side note too,
Mhm.
I learned that dogs are able to sniff for electronics, or so often like I wanted to get a dog for the RCMP and name it Crypto with a K, a little puppy, but I didn't quite get there. But hopefully that will happen. But I
Are
think
you,
it was,
do you mean still getting the dog? Is
yeah,
that
yeah.
okay?
But the FBI at the time, I believe, had a dog for that, and used it in one of the searches, and the dog was able to find like memory sticks, like jammed in a wall somewhere hidden. So it's really interesting. Like I could see how at the border that would be interesting with cars, and People bringing currency across on digitally. So I just find that fascinating. But back to your point, I think the interesting thing was that how cryptocurrency was taking off, and we were getting, there was regulation starting for the companies that are in Canada, um, and just being able to kind of see that uh, thing and dust it off and support it and really try to elevate what one individual really was pushing so hard for in the RCMP. And now I see it's really taken off. So it's not about me, it's more about her, but, like, it's really interesting to see that I was able to, in my circle of influence, be able to support something and make sure that it was, you know, um, taking off the way it needed to, and it adds to public safety and economic security for Canada.
Are you someone who is, you would have seen a lot of problems, right? That people were able to exploit and thus have all the criminal operations. Are you someone who, likes to try to solve those problems? Are you, what was your approach for, seeing the problems and then trying to have that influence that you needed in order to affect the system in some way? How did that feel?
Yeah, so my mindset right from the beginning when I started in a small detachment on Vancouver Island, I worked in a place called Souk, really beautiful village. It's big now, bigger now, more developed. But at the time in the mid 90s, yeah, it was just a small fishing village with lots of loggers and fishermen that worked hard and played hard. Um, and when I was there, this is kind of funny, but I would always, whenever I was on patrol, I'm like, not on my watch, not tonight. Nobody's gonna be getting away with anything, right? And that was always my mentality from a really like, the beginning of my career. I just didn't want to miss something. I
You're like a
didn't.
natural born policeman.
Yeah. And I also learned early on that if you talk to people, it's amazing what you learn. If you really are, like, sincere and respectful to people and just have conversations, whether it's a criminal or someone in the community or a victim, kids, whatever it is, it's amazing when you actually give people the time and you show your human side, what you'll learn from people. So I think I'm a little off track on your question,
That's
but I think
okay.
what it is when I was in financial crime, I was, the program's large, it's across the country. I was in headquarters, so I kind of knew my role from a, policy setting, direction setting, strategic setting. We were at the time just starting to roll out funding and get these IMLITs, integrated money laundering investigative teams set up in key areas in Canada, like the bigger cities. We were supporting that. We were also looking at the integrated market enforcement teams as well, looking how we could bolster those kind of specialized teams. So it was just really interesting to see everything that was happening, um, and just how I could support that from the center and really ensure that people, had a place to come, and I listened, right? Like, I think listening is half the battle in terms of, I didn't want to go in and change things right away. I just wanted to listen and understand. And, financial crime, even the regular members, so the uniformed members that have spent a lot of their career in financial crime, like, I would call them experts. Like, it's complex and you need to spend the time and do the work, and it's not always easy for the traditional police system or structure to support that because people, naturally would like to progress through their careers and get the odd promotion. But when you're stuck in a silo, sometimes that's limiting. But when you're passionate about it, it really doesn't matter, right? As an individual contributor, you're getting the value, you're getting your satisfaction from doing the work, the complicated work. So I had such respect for the regular members, the uniform members that were there, but I also loved that, like, there were so many specialized analysts, people who had been in that area for a long time, who came from other careers that came and joined the RCMP, probably took a pay cut to come and do some really interesting work, right? So I think it's a combination of, like, those regular members and the civilians that really, you need that. And I think with the new financial crime agency, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, is attracting the talent and then, like, hiring and retaining them and paying them, like, equivalent to what they probably could make in industry, because you need really good people. You're going to need police officers who have experience, because it's, with financial crime and this new financial crime agency, when you think about a financial crime investigation, a lot of people think it's numbers and books and accounting. Well, certainly yes, but there's wiretaps. There's probably witness protection. There's probably undercover. There's probably human sources. There's, big data. There's all this stuff that you need to be able to do. You need to understand your target criminal targets. Like, what is their lifestyle? What are their habits? Who's moving the money? How long? How do they do it? Like, there's just so much to cover, and you need so many like specialists. And then you need the crown prosecutors, right? That are taking on these complex, long investigations that are going to be hard to go through court because they're so long. There's time constraints, the complexities with wiretaps. There could be languages, dialects that they need to go through for disclosure so everyone understands what's happening. There's just so much to think about and to do better. Like, I think specialized groups of crown prosecutors would be amazing. And I think they're already, you know, kind of just forming anyway. I know in Ontario, Meg had a small group of like cyber lawyers or lawyers that were interested and educated in cyber that could take on some of these, these prosecutions. And so I think you'll see more and more of that. But that's really important as well.
I love the theme around having people with cross-functional kind of expertise or backgrounds, joining something new, and that's something that I've explored in my podcast with many others. People who are leading experts in AI, for example. It's like the people who come from somewhere else and
Mhm.
and can add something different or a different
Mhm.
perspective to the group is so important.
And they think differently,
They do
right?
think
Like,
differently.
that's what I think I loved about working in financial crime with some of the analysts, the civilians, public servants, is that they were approaching it differently than I was through my police officer lens. And it's not to say I was wrong, it was just a different approach, right? And when you bring that together, it just kind of it takes off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if I was, as somebody in a different sector, let's say I was in healthcare or in, engineering, and this was new to me, what would you tell me about kind of the challenge that we face in Canada when it comes to financial crime? I mean, you don't have to explore it, exhaustively, but just a few, key things to know about what's changing in the landscape that is creating this need.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's changing, what kind of would keep me up at night if I was Rob Stewart, who's going to be leading the financial crime agency. That's awesome. Hats off to him. Um, is, AI and AI scams for fraud and money laundering with like just kind of the advancements in technology. We have quantum computing just around the corner, probably a few years out. It's really going to change things, right? In terms of cryptography, all of the I mean, there's a lot of technology advancements that are happening. We'll adapt. It's just gonna be kinda, scary as it's approaching, as it always is. Um, but so there's I think those are the changes. I think something that's not changed is it's always been complex. It's always been in depth. Um, it's always required, you know, I think Canada has been slow to change some regulations and legislations and, the beneficial ownership registry. I mean, there's just a lot of things that I've gone through a couple of rounds of FATF in my career as well. I don't know if you know what FATF is, but the Financial Action Task Force, where Canada's assessed, it's an international um, uh, program. And it's basically assesses countries on kind of where they're at, right, in terms of tackling money laundering and fraud and all the financial crimes. And Canada, it's yeah, we can do better. And but what I'm really excited about is the fact that they've announced this financial crime agency, the fact that they're investing, they're going to put money. I feel like Canada is like in this hasn't happened in decades. They're going, no, we're going to do something about this. um, it's kind of hard for me because I grew up in the RCMP. The RCMP is near and dear to my heart. And I don't know if some people feel like the RCMP is going to be losing something because of this. I don't think so. I think Canada's gaining because the focus is going to be there, right? And the RCMP has been focused on financial crime, but the RCMP has a large mandate, right? And they're being pushed and pulled in many different directions and limited resources, limited specialized resources. I think they've done some amazing work in the financial crime area. Can it be better? Of course. I think having the focus on a new financial crime agency is amazing. I think it's like a fresh start. I really hope we get it right from the beginning and just build on that. other countries have financial crime agencies, and some of them have different mandates, some of them are coordination, intelligence. What I love about this one is it's going to be like a kick-ass one. Like, it's a police agency with police powers. They're going to investigate. And it's not just money laundering. Money laundering is huge and it needs to be looked at. But at first, I was worried that they weren't really paying attention to fraud. And I'm reading that Canada is putting an anti-fraud strategy together. Finally, they're going to be looking at fraud. Like, fraud is huge and it's impacting our national economic security. It's only 5 to 10% of fraud is reported, right? And it's like, I think what's reported is well over $500 million a year, but that's like peanuts. It's like in the billions. It's crazy. And it's everything from, like, when you think of scams, like romance scams, newcomer scams, there's real estate scams, there's like anything can have a scam, any angle. And I really learned that during COVID, because I'll tell you, organized crime didn't miss a step to get right in there with those CERB benefits, and how can they defraud the government of a lot of money. Because Canada, like, we needed to act quickly and we needed to get money in the hands of people who needed it, right? At a time when they really needed it. And criminals don't care. They're greedy and they want the money, and that's what they do. And we have to be aware of that. So I think Canada, like, this is our time. Like, sure, we're nice people. Don't mess with us, right? Like, no more. Like, I don't want to be a victim of your fraud. No way. And it's going to happen. Like, I don't know, like, show of hands, maybe, and don't be embarrassed. Anyone in the room ever been a victim of a fraud? Yeah, it happens. Like, it happens. And sometimes it's small, but a lot of times it's big. Like, I've heard of um like elderly fraud where people have been defrauded of their whole life savings, and then people suffer. Like, it's not just a financial loss, it's like mental health. They have struggles, some people commit suicide. Like, this is a real thing that really has a huge impact on families, people, on their lives. So it's a crime and it is public safety, and it is national security.
It is. You're making my job very easy today, Kelly. I'm really just sitting here. I'm so glad that you asked that question about fraud and scams. So it is hard to talk about. Do you think that we're talking about, these issues enough, or do you think we could be talking about them more?
I think we should be talking about them a lot more. And I think too, we need to look at how we investigate frauds, because, um, a lot of frauds get reported to this small little group of hardworking people at the CAFC, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. Um, but that's just a coordination center, right? And then they push it out to the POJs, the police of jurisdictions. But, like, the police of jurisdictions are struggling keeping up with, like, what's happening in front of them in the physical world, in terms of safety and with patrols and investigations. So they have to be choosy on what they take in terms of what fraud, what level, and what's the outcome going to be. Is it worth doing? So a lot of frauds don't get investigated, and then there's frauds that are happening here and there. And it's, usually the CAFC with some of their analytical tools that will say, hey, wait a minute, this is like happening everywhere. This is a trend. This is a threat. This is something bigger than just, when you piece it all together, it's pretty big. So I definitely think in Canada, we can do a better job on how we investigate fraud, whether it's hubs or, understanding the threats and trends better, public education, prevention. That's always key with everything in crime, but could be huge, because try to stop people from, being victimized, in the begin at the beginning. But I do think there's a better way to tackle fraud, and I know there's some groups that are trying. Like, I think Toronto has a great fraud kind of dedicated group, and there's others across the country in the RCMP. But it's really, like, it needs to be more robust, and really, like, we need to take this seriously.
Thanks, Kelly.
Mm.
I'd like to spend a little time now talking about the human side of things, if we can.
Mhm.
You talked earlier in the conversation about being, comfortable being uncomfortable. You were new to financial crimes. You were put it at a very high level to start with. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that we've all been in rooms where we're not super comfortable, and learning to feel comfortable in that state is a bit of an art
Mhm.
to it. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Like, and I'm definitely, I mean, I'm talking a lot about financial crime and I almost feel like an imposter because I am definitely not an expert in financial crime. I have exposure at a level that gave me kind of this like bird's eye view of what's happening from a policing perspective. And, I worked a lot with government. Um, I think, sorry, ask your question again, Amy. So you get to talk from a human perspective.
Yeah, what would you say to other people who might be,
Yeah.
feeling,
Uncomfortable. Mm,
uncomfortable in rooms that they're
yeah.
walking into for whatever reason it could be? And you could be male, female,
Yeah.
like it could be about your expertise, about your newness to something. Just, how do you feel more comfortable?
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So, yeah, being uncomfortable. So, I found it really, I hoped I didn't let it show, but inside I was just like, "What am I doing here?" Um, you know, Around some tables where there's some big things being talked about that are kinda I'm just getting kind of brought up to speed on and really understanding. And I think what's hard for me is I like to engage, I like to, interact with people, build that trust, the relationships, but I felt like I was so new, I just needed to sit and listen, and then I thought, "Do they think I'm stupid?" And then I'm thinking, "Well, I don't wanna say something and confirm it, so I'm just gonna
Mhm.
kinda, like, take it all in," but it was really hard for
A lot of
me.
quiet executives are doing the same thing.
But it was really hard for me not to be, because I like to be engaged and I like to contribute, but it took me a while before, like, it took me a while and I didn't like it. Like, it's almost, yeah, but I had lived with it before because when I first came to Ottawa, I was put in, I started working in technical investigation services, for the RCMP, and I got involved in a lot of, like, covert electronic surveillance things and wiretaps and those sort of things, that's all I'll say. But every day I was working with really technical folks that were, rigging up this thing and that thing, and we're kinda doing some really cool stuff that's, needed judges' approval because traditional means of investigation weren't working, so we're doing some really neat things, but sometimes I felt like it was a different language, like this techie talk, and, we were looking at data at rest, data in motion, and even we got into network intrusions, like, we were just doing cutting edge things, and I just every day I would leave there almost with a headache. It's like learning a new language almost, like when you're working in an environment that's not your first language, like it takes so much extra effort. And then when you're the boss, you have to know what questions to ask because the devil's in the details, right? Everything might sound good on the surface, but once you scratch at it and say, yeah, but what about this? What about the privacy issues? What about the disclosure? Then things kind of the conversation shifts and you need to know what to ask. So, I think being uncomfortable is something that I kind of was for a long time, but I knew that I could if I put in the effort, put in the time, it would start to click and I would start to get it and start to be able to contribute. But it's that the beginning part that was hard, really hard.
So what kept you going?
I'm not a quitter.
Okay.
um, yeah, and I always felt like I mean, I think there's a lot of women in this room that probably can relate, but I also felt like like failure wasn't an option as a woman in the RCMP for me, like in the level in some of the positions I held. Like I had to have my stuff together and don't let them see you sweat and work through it and figure it out. But I think knowing again who you can rely on, like surrounding yourself with good people, trusting experts, asking the right questions. Yeah.
So it can be difficult, for yourself as an individual, but then you can also see that it's hard for people around you. So as a leader, when you're working with people who are under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure in investigations for very long periods of time, for example, what does human-centered leadership look like? What was it like, for them and what did you do?
Yeah. I mean, uh, I like to support people as best I can, right? Check in with them individually as a team. I think communication is super important as a leader. Um, you know, it's stressful. Like there's pressure. There's yeah, sometimes the media eyes are on you, right? And you have to some people can handle the pressure better than others. And it also depends on what's going on in their life. We all have personal lives, we all have things going on at home. Um, you know, different things can impact people and their ability to cope with the pressure at the time. So I think it's just, I always had an open door policy.
I think you were saying that sometimes like the biggest, toughest looking people can sometimes need a moment
They
as
do,
well,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think some of the biggest, toughest people that, you know, were in my office having some of those conversations, I don't know that they would have done that with other maybe male superiors. So I think women add a different dynamic that I think men can feel comfortable in that environment too in a different way and feel vulnerable. Which we all bring emotions and feelings to work, right? So I think it's good to get it out with someone you can trust. And I think too, like taking breaks from the work and like getting to know the people you work with and maybe having a bit of a social outing or doing something where you just kind of break away from it and kind of take a breath and remember that you're all in it together. I think that's super important. And seeing too when some people just work, 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 work. They don't go home and you're like, go home. You need to go home or you need to take a break. The overtime's great, but hey, like you need to have some rest and you need to keep your marriage intact.
For sure. Nervous laughter. So we're in our last, few minutes of the podcast. I do have
Already?
some other, I know, I do have some other questions, but I wanted to let folks, if anyone in the room has a question you'd like to ask, please feel free to raise your hand. Do we have any questions online at this point? No, we're good. Okay. So feel free to think about that. And meanwhile, I'll ask my next question, which is really about kind of decision making within these areas, which is really both in the financial crimes, area in terms of context, in terms like, is there anything that is inherently like slow in financial crimes? But also, are there other things what have you seen, and been frustrated with in terms of slowness of decision making or maybe risk aversion? Is there anything like that that you can point to in your experience, whether it was about, power or if it was about politics, if it was about something else in terms of some of those unseen dynamics that impact decision making in the system and what people can do.
Yeah, I think just sometimes it's the disjointedness of it all. And really, I just can't emphasize enough the need for good data and analytics and people with those skill sets. So I think, when I think about the Financial Crime Agency, I mean, it's going to be a government agency, right? They're going to have like certain levels and how they hire people, but pay people for their individual contributions because often what happens like from my experience in the RCMP is when we would hire people in, they can't really be making more than the boss because like it's all structured, right? And but pay somebody what they're worth and what they bring and they don't have to be the boss and they might not want to be the boss. They just might want to be the contributor that provides the expertise and not have to deal with all this HR leadership people stuff, right? Like let me do my job and pay me for it. And also, um, what was I? Where was I going with it? In terms of um, this financial crime agency too, like it, you got to hire the right people, use the data and analytics. Maybe even, is there an opportunity? There's so many talented folks in industry that are doing some amazing work. Is there stuff that you can contract out that doesn't impact like disclosure and the court process? The other thing I wanted to say too, where this is going to be like a policing agency with policing powers, they're going to investigate the biggest, most complex financial crimes and take it over the line through court and put bad guys in jail and take their houses, take their boats that they got illegally. That's what really gets their attention too when you start taking their stuff. They'll do jail time, but don't touch their house, car, boat, cottage, everything else, right? Where was I going? But people need to understand that if you're in a police organization, you're going to go to court and the bad guy is going to see you and you're going to have to say what you did and how you caught him or her. And I think a lot of people that work as specialists or with their technical expertise don't necessarily want the bad guy to see them. They don't really want to leave their office because they love what they do. But you have to know that when you work and you're going to be in a police agency that's going to bring people to court, get ready to go to court and testify and be prepared and know that, there's safeguards, but they're going to know who you are by name. That's the reality of it. But there are ways I think that you can have expertise in the background and maybe have services that are provided by experts, AI experts, other companies that can help in the background, that engine to help the front line who are going to be going to court be able to describe how they came to the conclusions they did with the trusted data that they had. You have to be able to lay it all out there because full disclosure, that's how we work in Canada.
Thanks for giving us that very candid kind of walkthrough of that. We've covered a lot of different areas today, starting with how you got into financial crime and what you loved about it and found so interesting. And we've also talked a little bit about the human side of things as well, and what's happening in Canada at large. Kelly, as you reflect on all of this, now that you're a few years out from that experience now, but you're still applying and thinking about it, and clearly very passionate about it.
I sound angry. I don't know. I'm not angry at you guys. I'm just passionate.
Like we're all carried along with your energy. We're all feeling very, very much like we need to do something at this point. So I guess my last question for you would be, what's something that we need more of?
Kindness. No, we need in terms of financial crime or just in general.
Whichever you feel like.
Yeah, I think in terms of financial crime, I think it's more, collaboration, less competing against agencies, really like let's improve how we share information. I can't stress enough how people need to get their data in order so that it's trusted. There's good governance, there's good hygiene, all those keywords, but it's super important. The data is your evidence. And we need good police officers too, right? We need people who know how to follow the bad guys and understand how they operate and be able to like really stick with them and get that evidence in the physical world. Yeah, I mean, it's collaboration, it's relationships, it's trust, and it's Team Canada. I think that's what people lose sight of is like now more than ever, it's so important. Our sovereignty, Canada's like kind of standing up for itself and still being collaborative, certainly with our international partners and being that good global citizen, but like really like having that sense of, hey, like we're not going to be the victims here. We're going to stand up for ourselves and we're going to work together. And this isn't just about one agency and how much money they get or how much good press they get. This is like about all of us working together. And it's not just about government, it's about private industry, the financial institutions, all of it, right? Like it's really coming together as like a Canadian society and saying, enough, no more.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks so much for letting us, really get into it, here today. I'm really enjoyed this, follow-up conversation with you. I really want to thank our in-person kind of studio audience today. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the conversation we had as well. And to our online folks also, please subscribe to Wired for Change if you get a chance. And let us know if you want Kelly to come back to talk about something else. Maybe we can ask you about cybercrime next time.
Sure.
There's lots to talk about. And Kelly is such a great guest. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks so much.
Thank you.